In life, sometimes we think we can outrun our past, but in reality, it will always chase us, like a ghost that we can never shake off. James, the billionaire, the powerful CEO with an empire built from the ground up, had everything: a career at its peak, endless wealth, and the admiration of many. But what he lacked was the most important thing of all: a family. 10 years ago, he made a brutal decision, a mistake he thought he could easily leave behind. An innocent child, a young woman who walked away. And then, he moved on with his life, leaving the past behind. He thought he would never be haunted by it again. But life, like a cruel game, wouldn't let him go. 10 years later. A fateful encounter, in a place he had long abandoned, brought him back. Emily, the girl he had left behind, now a strong mother. And Liam, the child he never realized was his own flesh and blood, now grown, smart, and filled with questions that had no answers. This story is not just about a shocking reunion, but a journey of regret, of love that never truly fades, and of the wrong choices that a man must face. Can the past ever be forgiven? Can a lost family ever be found, even if it will never be the same again? James was no longer the strong, proud man he once was. Now, he faced one question: could he redeem himself before it was too late? 10 years ago. On a scorching summer in a small New England town, where the waves crashed against the shore and the sea breeze carried the salty scent of the ocean. It was a place that felt worlds away from the bright lights of big cities, a place where time seemed to slow down, and old stories were still passed around at family dinners. James, at the time just 23, was the only son of a wealthy family in Boston. He grew up surrounded by luxury and power. His father was a well-known investor, and his mother, a beautiful, talented woman. James lacked nothing, from expensive sports cars to lavish vacations, from all-night parties to fleeting relationships. He had plenty of friends but was missing something that money couldn't buy: a true sense of living. James's world was made up of numbers, contracts, and outward success. He had been groomed to take over his family's empire, to lead the company to greater heights. But everything seemed too easy for him. He felt like the center of the universe, smug in his wealth. Always living life on his own terms. The trip back to the small New England town that summer wasn't his choice. It was his parents' wish, hoping their son would find peace and quiet after the pressures of business life. For James, it was nothing more than a short vacation, a place to escape the stress of work and family. On the first day in the small town, James had no plans other than to wander the empty streets, drive his sports car along the coastline, and occasionally stop for a coffee at small cafes. Then, one afternoon, when he decided to stop by a cafe by the beach that he had never noticed before, he met Emily. Emily wasn't like any girl James had ever met. She didn't care about his flashy appearance, the expensive car, or his rugged charm. Emily was simple: sun-kissed skin from working in the cafe, eyes as blue as the ocean, and long brown hair that always fell freely. She worked at her family's small cafe, where everyone knew each other, and perhaps it was this warmth and sincerity that drew James in. Their story started as simply as any random encounter: a few polite words, a shy smile, and then a natural conversation. But for James, it was anything but simple. He began to feel a stark difference between Emily and the other women he knew. Emily didn't care for expensive gifts, didn't ask about the powerful connections in James's world. She was just a girl living in a small town, working hard, and cherishing the simplest joys in life. So, James returned to Emily's cafe every day. He grew accustomed to her presence, gradually feeling like he had stepped into another world, a world he had never experienced. They talked about the little things, the daily life, the dreams and stories of the town Emily loved so much. There was no glittering materialism, no shadow of power, just authenticity and connection. Their relationship deepened over time. Through coffee dates and evening walks by the beach, they slowly became a part of each other's lives. James, though still carrying his proud ego, couldn't deny that Emily had done something to him, made him feel truly alive, no longer just a ghost among numbers. Then, everything changed one sweltering summer night when Emily found out she was pregnant. It happened quickly, and far too suddenly. Emily, with her innocence and trust, couldn't believe things had come to this point. She didn't know what to do, feeling confused and terrified. James, a man who had spent his life in control, was suddenly shaken. He didn't know how to face this. Emily, you have to get rid of the baby. We're not ready, James said, trying to stay calm, though his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Emily looked at him, her eyes holding an entire world, but they were too pained to say everything she was feeling. What about you? What will you do? I can't be involved, Emily. I have a huge future ahead of me, a company, a family. You understand, right? James tried to explain, but inside, there was only emptiness. He couldn't bear the thought of being tied down. He walked away, not looking back. That decision sent their lives on two separate paths. Emily, despite the pain, decided to keep the baby. She wouldn't let anyone, even James, decide her future. She continued on, alone, in the small town, with the child growing inside her and a heart filled with sorrow but also with strength. After the sudden and painful breakup with Emily, James returned to Boston, never looking back. He left behind the small seaside town, where a girl and a child would forever remain in his heart. But in that moment, James thought of only one thing: his future. His life continued to flow like a river, with contracts, meetings, and major projects that he spearheaded. The only thing that mattered in his world was success. He threw himself into his work, building his own empire. In the years that followed, James officially took over as the CEO of his family's company. With skillful management and a sharp vision, he elevated the company to new heights, overcoming every challenge the market threw his way. Important meetings, signing major contracts, lavish parties, and long business trips, all seemed like just another part of James's busy life. He entered high-stakes auctions, signed colossal deals, and expanded the family business into international markets. People called him one of the youngest, most successful CEOs in Boston, a symbol of decisiveness and talent. But despite having everything, James still felt something was missing, a void he couldn't explain. He always felt like he was chasing something he could never catch, like a ghost relentlessly pursuing him. His romantic relationships grew shallow, with no one ever staying in his life for long, despite the countless beautiful women who surrounded him. Late nights alone in his luxurious penthouse, he couldn't escape thoughts of the past. The image of Emily, her sad eyes, and her soft voice echoed in his mind, stirring an anxiety he couldn't control. He couldn't forget what had happened, couldn't erase the image of the girl and the child he had left behind. Each time he looked back, James asked himself, "Did I do the right thing?" But there were no answers. He decided to forget everything and threw himself into his work to numb those feelings. Meanwhile, Emily's life was far from easy. When she found out she was pregnant, she promised herself that no matter what, she would not let the baby become a burden. She raised her child on her own, never allowing herself to be weak during those tough months. Emily may not have had the comforts that other women might wish for, but she had love and faith in the future. She started working at a small bookstore, earning a living with her own hands, and dreaming of a better life for her son, Liam. James's son was born on a stormy night. Emily named him Liam, hoping that his name would be a fresh start, a light in her life. No matter how difficult life became, Emily always found joy in watching Liam grow day by day. The boy was her greatest motivation, her everything. In the years that followed, Emily raised Liam with love and resilience. Every day, she faced new challenges, from caring for her son to maintaining her job at the bookstore, but she learned to be stronger. Yet, deep inside, despite her efforts to forget, Emily could never erase James from her heart. She often wondered if he ever thought about them, if he ever regretted the decision he made all those years ago. Liam grew up smart and strong, but he was always curious about the father he had never met. Every time he saw happy families on the streets, he would ask, "Mom, where's my dad?" Emily could only smile sadly and reply, "Your dad is a very busy man, sweetie." Their story continued like this, full of challenges, but wrapped in love, with peaceful days passing by. Meanwhile, James continued to build his career, but loneliness still haunted him. Despite all his success, he could never find happiness. One day, as he looked into the mirror, he asked himself, "Am I happy?" And then, as if fate had conspired, a chance opportunity brought him back to the small seaside town in New England, where his past with Emily still lingered. This was the first time James felt something shift, not just in his work, but in his life as well. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with the program, we kindly ask you to leave a comment with your thoughts and feelings below. If you find the program meaningful, please don't hesitate to share it to support the channel and spread its values to those around you. We wish you an enriching listening experience. When Emily decided to keep the baby in her womb, she never imagined that her life would change forever. The first few months after that decision felt like she was living in a storm. Her parents disagreed, her friends distanced themselves, and she had to face the judgmental stares of those around her. In the small New England seaside town, everything easily became public knowledge. And her pregnancy felt like an unwanted, high-profile event, but despite the hardships, despite being pushed to the margins of society, Emily couldn't turn back. She had made her decision. Liam was her flesh and blood, and she would raise him with everything she had. With no money, no support from family or friends, she only had her unconditional love for her son. Each day passed, and she felt herself becoming stronger. Even though life outside was still full of challenges, Emily continued working at her family's small coffee shop, where she had started as a dreamy young girl, but now she had become a woman responsible for a child she never thought she'd have to raise alone. She tightened her budget, took on extra jobs when she could to earn money for her son, but she never lost hope. Every time Liam asked about James, the father he had never met, Emily felt a pain in her heart. "Who is my dad?" Liam often asked, his bright eyes full of curiosity. His questions made Emily's heart tighten. She didn't know how to answer. She could only smile and say, "Your dad is a very busy man, sweetheart. But he loves you so much, he just can't be with you right now." Answers like this, though she tried to comfort him, were filled with pain deep inside Emily. She didn't want to speak ill of James in front of Liam, but each time her son asked about his father, it felt like confronting a part of the past she couldn't escape. Days turned into years, and Liam grew up healthy and intelligent. He was always Emily's pride. Even as a child, Liam had qualities that anyone could recognize. He was smart, obedient, and always worked hard. Every time Emily looked into his bright eyes, she felt all her struggles lighten, but nothing could hide the absence of a father in Liam's life. The boy always felt that something was missing. Sometimes, when playing with friends and seeing other children with both a mother and a father, Liam would ask, "Mom, why isn't my dad here? Who is my dad?" Such questions, though innocent, tore Emily's heart apart. Every time he asked, she would look at him with love, but the regret was evident in her eyes. She didn't know how to explain it to him, how to answer that question without hurting her son. Years passed, and Liam grew older. When he entered high school, Emily decided once again, not just for Liam but for herself, that it was time to face the past. Liam was old enough to understand the truth about his father, about James. Emily couldn't keep hiding it any longer. She decided to write a letter to James, a letter filled with all the emotions she had kept hidden for years. In it, she told about Liam, the hardships she had faced, the love she had for her child, and the necessity of telling Liam about his father. The letter wasn't sent right away. Emily wasn't sure whether James would want to receive it or if he would care about the child he had abandoned. But a part of her felt that if she didn't do it, she would never be able to explain to Liam why a father would abandon his own child. Throughout those years, despite always feeling the absence of an important part of her life, Emily persevered. She lived not only for herself but for Liam. She raised him with all the love she had, taught him the important values of life, taught him resilience, love, and kindness. In every circumstance, she always smiled and reassured Liam that everything would be okay. For Emily, her love for Liam was everything. Even though she had never received support from James, her love for her son was the strongest thing. Liam might not have had his father beside him, but he had an amazing mother, a strong, resilient, and loving mother. And that was all he needed. James never thought that one day his past would come back and change everything. 10 years had passed since he left Emily and the child he had never met. He had built a strong career, becoming a young CEO, famous for his talent and bold business decisions. Despite having money, fame, and power, James always felt that something was missing. But he had never truly faced his past until today. One day, when James received an invitation to join a project sponsoring a school program in New England, the place where he grew up, he didn't hesitate. It was an opportunity to further build his image in the community and also a chance to return to the hometown he had abandoned. The preparation for the project took several weeks, but when he finally arrived in the small seaside town, everything turned out differently than he expected. James had no idea that this return would bring him an unforgettable shock. That morning, when he attended the project's inauguration ceremony, a ceremony held at his old school, he was surprised to see a familiar woman standing in the corner. Emily. She hadn't changed much, but her face now radiated strength and maturity. She stood there, holding some documents, talking to a group of teachers. He couldn't believe his eyes. Time had passed, but he still recognized her immediately. Emily. The girl he had once loved, then abandoned with a cruel decision. And now, here she was, more grown up, with a different presence. But what shocked James even more was, she wasn't alone. Liam, the boy he had never met, was standing next to her, looking around. The boy was about 10 years old, with black hair like his, and bright eyes, almost like a mini version of him from when he was a child. Liam looked at James with a curious gaze, as if sensing some kind of connection. A strange, chaotic feeling surged in James's chest. He couldn't believe he was meeting Emily again and, the son he had left behind. The shock and the guilt overwhelmed him. Liam was his son, and now he had to face the undeniable truth. Emily saw James and stopped. She tried to keep calm, but her eyes betrayed a bitterness. She had lived 10 years with memories that never faded, but now, that past had returned, unprepared. James. She spoke, but her voice caught, unsure of what else to say. They stared at each other in silence, as if time had stopped. Liam didn't know what was going on, but he could feel the tension between them. He didn't understand everything, but inside, he had a sense of confusion, as if something important was happening, and it had something to do with him. When the meeting ended, James couldn't stop thinking about everything he had just witnessed. He had lived a life that seemed perfect, but now everything had crumbled. Unanswered questions filled his mind. How could I have left like that? How could I let her raise our son alone while I lived a life of luxury? These thoughts swirled around him like a storm, making it impossible to focus on anything. That evening, James decided to visit Emily. He couldn't wait any longer. He needed to talk to her, needed to understand everything. He couldn't go on living with guilt and regret. Emily welcomed him into her home, a small house near the beach where she had lived for many years. The house was a bit old, but it exuded warmth and familiarity. Liam was fast asleep after a long day, and the atmosphere in the house grew quiet, like a still frame. I know you came here to understand everything, Emily said, her eyes not leaving James. It's not that I wanted to hide things from you, but it's not that simple. James sat across from her, the guilt making it hard for him to look her in the eye. He took a deep breath and said, I don't know where to start, but I need to say it. I can't keep living like this, Emily. I left you, I left Liam. And now I don't know how to make up for everything I've lost. A long silence followed. But this time, it wasn't one of resentment, but understanding. You don't have to make up for everything, Emily replied, her voice calm but full of strength. Liam has grown up with my love. As for you, I don't know what you want, but maybe our lives have changed too much to go back to how they were. James realized the change in her tone. She was no longer the innocent girl he once knew. Emily was now a strong, independent woman, and she didn't need saving from anyone. Not even him. This meeting wasn't just a shock for James, but also a turning point for him, an opportunity to face the mistakes of his past. But could he change everything? And could he form a bond with Liam, the son he had never known, or were the wounds too deep to heal? The feeling of regret clung to James like an inescapable ghost. He had it all, wealth, fame, power, but after the fateful encounter with Emily and Liam, he realized that these things meant nothing compared to the years he had missed in his son's life. During those years, he hadn't just abandoned a woman, but also a child, a part of himself. He began to see his life in an entirely new light. James couldn't go back and fix the mistakes of the past, but perhaps there was still something he could do. He decided to approach Liam, trying to become a part of the boy's life, even if it was only a small part. He also hoped to gain Emily's forgiveness, to start anew, though he knew it wouldn't be easy. The first few times he reached out to Liam, James felt like a stranger. The boy looked at him with suspicious eyes, as though trying to figure out who this man was. Even though James knew the boy could sense his own uncertainty, he tried to approach him gently, not wanting to hurt the child again. Liam, I'm James, he tried to say, his voice soft, filled with a desire to connect. I'm your father. The boy stared at him for a moment, then turned away, offering no response. James felt a pang of disappointment, but he knew he couldn't rush things. He had to be patient. After all, for the past 10 years, the boy had never had a father figure in his life, and now, a stranger appeared out of nowhere, suddenly claiming to be his father. That feeling was not something that could be accepted easily. With Emily, things were even more complicated. She looked at him, but no longer with the gaze of the innocent girl he once knew. Her eyes now carried a hardened, guarded look, a trace of the pain she had endured. Emily had lived a difficult life, facing challenges on her own. She didn't need him, she had lived without him all these years, and she wasn't sure if he could ever truly be a part of her life again, as part of their family. Each time James tried to approach Emily, she avoided him. She couldn't easily forgive him, and that made James feel like a stranger in his own life. His apologies weren't enough to make up for the harm he had caused, and despite his efforts, it seemed like nothing he did could erase the pain he had left behind. "I can't forget what you did," Emily said one time, her voice cold but filled with hurt. "You left us alone. You can't just come back and say you want to make things right." Sometimes, one mistake can last forever. James knew that no words could alleviate the anger and pain in her heart. He had left everything behind. He had chosen his career, chosen an easy, irresponsible life, while she had faced every hardship on her own. Now, he wanted to step back into her life, to make amends. But was it too late? Liam still didn't accept him. The boy still couldn't call him Dad. Every time James tried, the boy would either stay silent or turn away. James realized that not a few days or weeks would change everything. Liam needed time, and perhaps, for the rest of his life, the boy would never call him Dad the way James hoped. But James couldn't give up. He knew he had made mistakes, but he also believed that he could fix things, if it was possible. The long nights in the hotel room, James couldn't sleep. He constantly thought about Liam and Emily, about the years that had passed, and what he could do to heal things. But he also knew that no matter how hard he tried, things couldn't go back to the way they were. Emily had once been his lover, but now, she was a strong, resilient mother. And Liam, that boy, might never see him as a father. The image of a happy family that he once dreamed of was now just a distant memory. However, James couldn't give up. The feeling of regret still tormented him, but it also fueled him to keep trying every day. He wanted to make things right, to prove to Emily and Liam that he could be a good person, that he deserved their love and trust. But was it too late to start over? James wasn't sure, but he wouldn't give up. For him, this was his last chance to do the right thing. James didn't know how long he would stay, but one thing was certain: he couldn't leave now. When he first met Emily and Liam again, he thought he was just facing his past, doing something for himself. But now, what he had found here, in the small house by the sea, was something much deeper. He was no longer the proud man he once was. No longer the powerful CEO. James was now a man slowly learning how to start over, from the most basic things: love, forgiveness, and responsibility. He decided not to force anything, not to demand anything. He would simply stay, quietly, as part of the new life he wanted to build, even if it would never be as perfect as he once hoped. He helped Emily and Liam with daily tasks. He was no longer an outsider in their lives, but a part of it. In the mornings, he would take Liam to the beach, teaching him how to skip stones across the water. In the afternoons, he helped Emily prepare dinner, talking about the small things in life. These simple tasks brought him a warmth he had never felt before. Liam no longer avoided him as he had before. The boy began to engage with him more, not because he was his father, but because he felt real love, love that didn't need to be forced, love that didn't require grand words. One day, as he and the boy were sitting on the porch, Liam looked directly into his eyes and called out, "Dad." It wasn't a call made out of obligation or because the boy wanted to make things easier. It was the call of a child who had recognized the love James had for him, not from empty promises, but from true actions. A connection, not perfect, but real. Emily still kept her distance. She couldn't immediately forgive what had happened, and perhaps she would never forget. But James no longer craved her forgiveness as he once had. He didn't wait for her to say anything to prove she had forgiven him. He simply stayed. She looked at him, no longer with cold eyes, but neither with eyes filled with love. She simply looked, and sometimes, he sensed something gentler, a kind of acceptance. Emily didn't need to say anything. She just needed time. And perhaps, time would help her find the answers to her emotions. She understood that forgiveness wasn't an easy act, but it wasn't something she had to do immediately. She understood that, in life, sometimes maturity didn't just come from confronting mistakes, but also from accepting that nothing is perfect, and James understood that, perhaps, he would never completely heal everything, but the important thing was that he had started. He had done right, not the way he thought was right, but the way life, love, and time allowed. In the end, they didn't need to be a perfect family to feel that they were part of each other. Liam had called him Dad, that was enough. At least for now. Emily didn't need to fall in love with him again, but her gaze showed a kind of understanding. Everything might not be perfect, but it was slowly healing. James didn't need to marry Emily to feel like he had found his family again. They didn't need to reunite in the way society or he once envisioned. But there was a glimmer of hope, a new hope, a feeling that, at last, the pieces were starting to fall into place. And sometimes, an open-ended conclusion is all that life can give. Maybe things will never go back to the way they were, but not everything needs to have a perfect ending. Perhaps, as long as they felt happiness in the small moments, in the true connections, that was enough. James looked out at the sea, where the waves gently kissed the shore, unhurried. Life is like that, things might not always go the way we want, but as long as we can find peace in the simple things, it's enough. In life, each of us faces decisions, mistakes, and sometimes, opportunities to make things right. But do we have the courage to face the past and start over? The journey of a man trying to find his family. A strong mother protecting her child, and a child searching for answers to questions that were never answered. How will it end? And can love heal it all? James stood looking out at the sea, where each wave kissed the shore, like a reminder that life is never simple. 10 years ago, he had run away, built a world he thought was perfect, but now, standing before the two people he had left behind, he realized that only love and forgiveness were truly important. Emily could never forget what he had done, but in her gaze, there was no longer hatred. There was only a void, a distance that time and effort would slowly fill. Liam, the boy who had called him Dad, didn't do it because he was the man standing in front of him, but because he felt the genuine love and tireless effort from James. Life is never perfect. There is no perfect ending. But what James, Emily, and Liam had was love, not complete, but real love. And sometimes, that's all we can do: love, make amends, and keep moving forward, without looking back. This open-ended conclusion isn't the end of a story, but the beginning of a longer journey. A journey of forgiveness, love, and growth. Will they find peace within themselves, or will they continue to face new challenges? The answer will always lie in each step, in each day they choose to move forward. If you feel this story has touched your heart, join Heart Glow in continuing the journey to explore deeper stories about love, regret, and forgiveness. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to receive more touching and humanistic stories. Each story is an opportunity for us to reflect on ourselves and learn how to love better. Let your heart glow with Heart Glow.